Hello, everyone. My name is Josh Hurtado. If you don't know me, I've been watching, reviewing, programming, releasing Indian films for the last 13 years now, and I've never really done a video review before. In fact, I haven't really written many reviews for the last couple of years because I've been behind the scenes doing programming for a long time. And so it's been really weird to try and juggle that side of what I do with actual criticism. But this isn't really a review. It's just kind of like the things that I was thinking about as I was watching Mark Antony today. First of all, let's talk about the movie. Mark Antony is a sci-fi action comedy from director Adhik who I was not familiar with before this film. It stars Vishal and SJ Suryah. Vishal, I know the name, but I don't think I've ever actually seen any of his star films. And SJ Suryah, I only know from Karthik Subbaraj's Iraivi, which I did not love, but I do believe that he was one of the best parts of that film. So I was interested to see it because it's a high concept film. It's a time traveling telephone gangster movie, which the trailer looked fantastic. And I wanted to go see what it was all about. Now, I've been going to see these big high concept Indian films in the theater since about 2010. First one was Enthron, which set the bar very high. There's not been much that has come to that level in the years since. But, I'm always excited when someone takes a chance on something new. And so this being a very high concept film, I wanted to take a chance on it. And I don't regret it, although I do think that there are some places where the film could have done better. And so let's just kind of talk about it. So as I mentioned before, the film stars Vishal and SJ Suryah as sort of cousins, more or less. Their fathers were both also played by Vishal and SJ Suryah. Their fathers were gangsters in the 70s. They were best buds. And so, Vishal's dad was like the do-gooder gangster, and then SJ Suryah's dad was the take it all for me gangster. And they clashed quite a bit. His father, SJ Suryah's father's name was Jackie Pandian. And then the son's name, Madhan, I think it was. Sorry, it's not in the IMDb, so I'm really trying hard to remember these things. And then Vishal's father was Antony, and his name is Mark. So Mark Antony. And then also, a lovely surprise for me was the appearance of Sunil, who I have been a big fan of for a long time. Because one of my favorite films of all time is Magadhira. It's a first SS Rajamouli film that I ever saw. If you don't know, I helped to release Triple R last year, and I'm currently putting Rajamouli's older films back into theaters as well. And so I'm kind of a mark for Sunil. I love his performance in Magadhira. I really super love his performance in Marietta Ramana, which is one of my absolute favorite films, which I wish got more play. So if you're watching this video, please try and book Marietta Ramana. I have the rights to that film. I want to put it on screens and put it in front of people because it's really fantastic. And he plays sort of a rival gangster in this film. Now, I'm not going to go into the plot too much because it is very complex. At least the actual storyline is very complex. It goes back and forth 150 times. But essentially what happens is that an inventor in the 70s, whose character's name is Chiranjeevi, I don't know the actor's name, I apologize for that, invents a time-traveling phone, which basically is a phone that can call the past. And so he decides that he's going to utilize this invention to kind of like in sort of a Marty McFly Back to the Future way, where he is going to call back into the past to change the present in his favor. This is in the first 5 minutes of the film, so it's not a spoiler. His wife lost her leg in an accident at the beginning of the film, or she appears with a leg missing at the beginning of the film, and it's because of something that he did, and so he wants to undo that, and he uses his phone to do so and learns that his invention has worked, which is fantastic. He goes out to celebrate, gets rip-roaring drunk, and loses the thing, which then gets found 20 years later by Our protagonists in the film, the dual protagonists, Vishal and SJ Suryah. It's basically a multi-star film. And then they decide to use it to their advantage, both in terms of gaining more wealth for themselves. In Vishal's case, in Antony, the son's case, Mark is the son. In Mark's case, he wants to bring his father back. His father was killed a long time ago, and so he wants to utilize this phone to bring his father back to life by changing the past, and et cetera, et cetera. And it goes back and forth like that. Mark wants to bring his father back. Madan wants to bring his father back, and then they go back and forth 100 times. It's confusing at first, but once you get the hang of it, it really kind of it's well written enough that you can follow. Now, here's the thing: the movie is pretty long. It's said 2 hours 40 minutes on Fandango. That feels about right. I feel like that the interval hit around the hour and a half mark, maybe a little bit less than that. But the thing is that the first half of the film, they're front loading so much information that it's really hard to follow. And they do this thing that it's one of my pet peeves about specifically Indian films, because a lot of other films from other countries, as far as I'm have been aware, don't really do this, is that they start the film with like 5 minutes of voiceover, where you've got backstories and animations explaining all these history of these characters and all this other stuff. And so when the actual characters show up, like in live action after the animation's done, you're supposed to have remembered all of the things that were just shouted at you in narration for the first 5 minutes of the film. Now, in this case, it works itself out a little bit later on, but it is annoying. It's another thing that I'm not a big fan of. Saho did it a few years ago. I know that films like KGF 2 did it also, where they're trying to front load a bunch of information that happened in a previous film or that happened in some previous time frame before the film was before the action of the film begins, and it's very complex and it's hard to hold all those things in your head, especially as a foreign viewer. I don't speak Tamil. I understand enough words that I can hear when they're cursing. So that's one thing, and I can do that in a lot of languages at this point. So that's annoying. And the first half of the film basically introduces you to all the characters, and it does all these things to get you on the side of Mark, the son. Now, Mark, played by Vishal. Here's one of the major issues with the film that I had, is that the film, like I said, it's a time travel movie, so it's set in multiple time frames. A bulk of the film is set in 1995, and then the past of the film is 1975. Now, the wonderful thing about this is that these two time frames allow for director Ravichandran and his production design team to create amazing set pieces and amazing sets. The costume design is incredible. It's very gaudy. A lot of the action sequences take from that kind of, pre-globalization era film. And so they are playing to the front benchers, as you would say in India, the people that are there to hoot and holler, which we see in the film. They're in a movie and they're hooting and hollering. Love it. Okay, my favorite thing. So that's a thing. But the thing is that Vishal's character is out of place in this world. Mark, the son, is out of place in this world because Mark doesn't want to be a gangster. He hates his father for having become a gangster. He is a mechanic. He wants to live a good life. He feels like his father betrayed him or betrayed the world by being this gangster, and he wants nothing to do with it, which is a pain for him. It pains his heart. But the thing is that everyone else in the film is fully on board with being a gangster, especially SJ Suryah, as both his characters, Jackie Pandian, the father, and then Madan Pandian, the son, both fully on board with being gangsters, love being gangsters. It's the only way they want to live. And so Vishal's character feels out of place in this overblown, extra bright, neon, colored world that Mark Antony has created. And so it's such a contrast between character and setting with Vishal that it's very difficult, because he's supposed to be one of the protagonists, but he feels out of place in this world, which I feel is part of the point of the film, but his performance is so, it's not lackluster, it's just low energy for a lot of the film that really takes a lot away from it. Whereas SJ Suryah is just acting his butt off for 2.5 hours. Like I said, I'd only ever seen him in Araivi, and in that film, he is an alcoholic. Well, not an alcoholic. He's a drunk in that movie, and so he's acting that. And then recently we just saw the first real teaser of Karthik Subbaraj's Jigar Thanda XX. Now, I saw Jigar Thanda in the theater. Like I said, I'm a big Karthik Subbaraj film, and in Karthik Subbaraj's Jigar Thanda XX, SJ Suryah plays the role of the filmmaker, and I'm excited to see what he does with that role. So he is doing everything he possibly can to make this film entertaining, which is fantastic. He absolutely takes it over just because of the fact that his character is in line with the world that's being created by the film, whereas Vishal's feels out of place in a way that is not, he doesn't feel like a fish out of water. He feels like he sleepwalked in from another movie, which is troublesome because his older character, his father character, Antony, does make an appearance at the end of the film, spoiler alert, in a modern day Avatar, and he just runs away with the climax of the movie. He's absolutely gripping to watch. And so I feel like that's definitely more Vishal's wheelhouse, is the sort of big mass star stuff. And it's not what he's doing for most of the film, which makes him feel like he's dragging the whole thing back. I do think it's intentional. I understand what they're doing, but it's a real drag on the pacing of the film and the energy of the film whenever he shows up in this like mopey kind of mechanic, woe is me character. It's not fun to watch. And I feel like Mark Antony wants to be fun to watch more than anything else. So that's the big thing. That's the one of my biggest downsides of this film is not necessarily Vishal's performance, but his character through the film doesn't fit with the rest of everything else going on. Now, once the second half starts, it's 100% the SJ Suryah show. And SJ Suryah is doing, like I said, everything he can to entertain. He is over the top, like in a big way, but in a way that is never not entertaining. Now, the problem with this for me, it's really hard for me to go into one of these movies and take off my curator hat because I've done programming for a long time. And so a lot of what I do when I watch Indian films is I watch them and I decide for myself first, is this going to work for a non-Indian audience? Is this going to work for someone who doesn't know Tamil films, doesn't know Indian films, doesn't know the conventions? They can just walk in and enjoy themselves. And I feel like this one doesn't pass that test. It's really one for the fans. A lot of the things that are going on in the film are very difficult to parse. There are a lot of little in-jokes. Some of the in-jokes you can kind of roll with. But there are a lot of things in the film in terms of the broadness of the comedy. There's a character named Maserati. He's a very famous Tamil comedian. But he takes, the comedy track of the film, which if you don't know Indian films, they throw these comedy tracks and their comedy characters in. Comedy uncles are called in a lot of places, in order to appeal to a broader audience. So the idea is, this is a masala film, so they want to have action and comedy and music. Music is great. A lot of the dancing is really great. The musical numbers are a lot of fun. But they want to have all those things in the same film so they can appeal to a 4-quadrant audience like we would do in the US. But in this case, it is so broad that I don't feel it's going to connect with a non-Indian audience in a way that would need to in order to become some sort of crossover success. So that's that. Now, on its own terms, it's perfectly fine. I was sitting in a theater. The other people in the theater, all Tamil people, it's just, I'm used to it at this point, were enjoying themselves. Big laughs at a lot of the stuff that I was also kind of laughing at. There were some laughs in places that I didn't understand the jokes, which, again, I don't speak Tamil. It's fine. That happens. But I really think that this is one for someone who's a veteran of these types of films, because you'll understand a little bit of the pacing, a little bit of the wild variation in tones through the film. and get more out of it than someone who's just walking in off the street. You know, Mark Antony is a very friendly name for a non-Indian audience because it's names that are pronounceable, and it is very easy to understand that. And that's one of the things that I've talked to people about over the years, is that if you're going to have a film that's going to be a crossover success, or even programming it for a film festival, it needs to be something that someone can say. And so one of the problems not problems, but one of the things that prevents Tamil films from often making that jump is that they do have Tamil names, and Hindi films, Telugu films, Kannada films. If they are like a full sentence, it's very difficult for someone to follow, or to even say to the person at the ticket counter that I want to see this film. Mark Antony doesn't have that problem. So that's a good thing. Now, the real thing that threw me off is this film is a very high concept film, a time traveling phone. It's an amazing thought. And it's not the first time that Tamil films have done time travel. It's not even the first time that a bigger budget Tamil film has done time travel. In fact, as far as I know, they are one of the industries within India that are more friendly to high concept science fiction and high concept horror films that other industries sort of shy away from. And in terms of time travel, at least over the last decade, I mean, this is just in the last decade, and I haven't seen a ton of films in the past before like the 2000 era in Tamil, but there have been two really, really great time travel films in Tamil cinema. One was 2015's Indru Netru Nalai, which was a low budget, high concept crime time travel film that involves a time machine sort of sitting in a garage, and then things go crazy. Again, it's linked to crime and gangsters because that's kind of what Tamil films do for the most part. It's directed by R. Abikumar. It's and the big stars here are Vishal and Karunakaran. I'm not going to say that I pronounced that correctly, so please correct me if I got that wrong. My pronunciation is not great, even after all these years. I really try. I promise I do. So that one was one of my favorite films of 2015. It played in theaters, but then it just completely disappeared. No one got to see it in terms of non-Indian folks and non-Tamil folks. Also, I think it ended up like in a Hindi dubbed version on YouTube at some point, but it really didn't get the kind of play that it probably could have had it gotten picked up by a festival or something like that. And the other one, the big one that's happened over the last decade, is Vikram Kumar's 24. 24 is an amazing film. Now, I'm a big Suryah fan, and I had been watching Suryah films since about 2010, and he had a big string of flops, like a big string, and it's kind of like he's up and down with his filmography, really, but he's always really fun to watch. And so I keep giving him chances. I keep going back saying, this is going to be the one that I really love, and it's never that one until 24. 24 is fantastic. He is super charismatic. Music's really not really much to think about, but it's a really well-made film. It's about a guy with a pocket watch that can stop time. It's really, really a wonderful movie. It won a national award for cinematography, which I completely agree with. That cinematography is fantastic in that movie. It makes me care about cricket for a hot second. There's just a little cricket scene. It's not much, it's not Lagan, but it's really, really wonderful. And it's one of Suryah's best performances and best films over the last decade. And I really, really recommend 24. I don't know where it's streaming now. It was on Amazon for a long time. I don't know if it's there anymore, but if you can find it, check it out. It's a lot of fun. But anyway, all that to say, time travel is not a new thing in India. And in Tamil films, science fiction and high concept films are not a new thing either. This one has an issue, though. So a lot of the stuff is a lot of fun. Like I said, the production design, all the practical stuff, the costumes, the sets, a lot of the props even are really, really fantastic. But because this is 2023 and we have gone through this cycle of not having, of sort of the evolution of visual effects as they pertain to Indian films, there is this expectation that Indian films are going to utilize these effects now, after people like Shankar, who is mentioned in the movie, who's one of the one of the call outs in the movie, and Rajamouli, obviously, have used special effects to create, spectacle in big ways, and this film just doesn't get it right. The practical stuff is all great, and in fact, there's some really cool practical stuff in the middle of a bunch of visual effects nonsense and what look like unfinished effects throughout the film. It's distracting how poor the visual effects are integrated into the film. This might be a budget thing. It might be a time crunch thing. I don't know what it might be. It might just be that they didn't have the ability to make these things. I don't know what the problem is, but I know there's a problem. Now, part of me says, could they have pushed it back? That is a possibility, but it also adds money to the budget. And so maybe they just didn't have the budget to actually push it back and then put that money back into the movie. That's possible. Could it be that they just didn't have the technicians available who were able to do this kind of thing in the time frame they needed? Also possible. Also money. Okay, it all comes back to money. This is not an A-level film. It's not got one of the A-level stars. It has sort of second string stars. Still great, but you're not going to get your big budget with Vishal and SJ Suryah the same way that you would with someone like Ajit Kumar or Vijay or Rajnikant, Kamal Hassan. All these people are going to get much more money to play with than a film starring these other folks, no matter how good the script is or how well the performers are on screen, are acting on screen. So that was a big problem for me, because there are lots of really cool set pieces that you can see. You can see halos around the characters where it's a composite shot. So what that means is they have the actors acting in front of what is essentially a green screen, and then they're projecting digitally behind them crazy stuff. Fires, crazy backgrounds, all kinds of stuff going on behind them, but there's this little glow around their heads. So you can tell that they weren't actually in the middle of all of that, which is sad. And it's very noticeable in this film. And there is even one point in the climax where someone is obviously acting in front of a green screen and they fall back and then part of their arm disappears because it was the shadow was wrong or something. And so the visual effects just didn't catch it. And so his arm is see-through for a hot second. If you don't pay attention to it, you might not notice it, but I've done this enough that I noticed it. It's a bummer. It's really a bummer because there are a lot of effects in here that are really cool ideas that just aren't executed. They're just not. And that's another thing that's going to be a deterrent for an international audience is this big high concept film. They're trying to do a lot. They don't have the ability to do all the things they want to do. And so probably what should have happened was they should have scaled back or rewritten or revisualized the scene to do what they were able to do with the budget they had, with the technicians they had, as opposed to reaching beyond their grasp, which I feel is what happened here. Now, did I enjoy it? I did. I liked it. It wasn't great, but it was really good. And it was fun to watch someone try something new. A lot of the effects are goofy, even some of the physical effects. Like there's a levitation aspect to the film where when you call on this phone, you levitate for the first time. Those all looked like people in harnesses around their crotches. So they looked very uncomfortable floating in the air. It was funny and I could get behind it. That wasn't really an issue in terms of visual effects. It was just removing ropes, I'm sure. But it was sort of silly. And so, that was fun. But like I said, overall, it's not going to be something that's going to, if you show it to a Western audience, that they're going to be like, oh, I'm going to watch more Tamil films. That was great. It's not that movie. If you are a diehard like I am, then you'll get something out of it. But if you're not a diehard like I am, it's going to be a bit more hit and miss, sort of your mileage may vary sort of situation. So I did not know the director, Adhik Ravichandran, but with an idea like this and the execution he was able to get out of what he had, I'm interested in seeing what he does next. And that's always a good sign because you don't always hit a home run the first time. As much as this film contains really solid performances from Sunil and Surya, and then at the end, Vishal, when he shows up in a different avatar, All really solid performances for the type of film that this is. I think that is great. I just think there are some technical things that they needed to adjust for, either by pushing the film off, by adding more money to the VFX budget, or by just rewriting the film so they didn't have those big gaping holes in their ability to execute what they really wanted to show on screen. So that's kind of where I land with this movie. It's not. I had fun with it. I'm into seeing what Ravichandran is next. It really, really gets me excited for seeing Jigar Thanda XX with SJ Suryah, because I know that Karthik Subbaraj has a little bit more cachet than Ravichandran does, and so he'll be able to get what he wants on screen in a more effective way than this smaller production was. So yeah, that's essentially where I come down with this film. Good, not great. Very exciting voice, I think, in genre film, that I'm looking forward to seeing more of what he does. You know, sometimes that pans out, sometimes it doesn't. But, you know, you got me interested, and that's something to start with. So I'm sorry if this rambled. I didn't write any of it. I really just have literally IMDb pages over here so I can get the names. Some of them I already knew, but like directors and stuff like that, I get lost sometimes because I'm watching Tamil films. I know stars. But thanks for watching. If you check this out, Adhik Ravichandran, I got my eye on you. You're really good. You have some great ideas, and I can't wait to see what you do next. SJ Suryah, can't wait to see you in Jigar Thanda XX. And thanks. See you guys later.